about something we all have experienced. Some people might have a good memory for what happened during their kindergarten years, and some people claim they can even remember stories from when they were still babies. Most of us believe that our memories are reliable. We assume that if we remember something clearly, it must have happened exactly the way we remember it. Did you ever think that your brain might lie to you? Today, we are going to explore one of the most fascinating topics in cognitive psychology: false memory. Welcome back, my angels. I hope you're all doing well. This is Melissa, and you are watching my cognitive psychology video. Don't be scared, I'm not your teacher, but a study buddy. Yeah, even though I passed the exam already, I still need to keep learning these topics. Before we begin, it is important to understand what psychologists mean by a false memory. When I say your brain is lying to you, I admit that I was a bit exaggerating. By the definitions of psychologists, a false memory is not the same as lying. When someone lies, they know the information is false. But a false memory is a little different. It is not imaginations or daydreaming. Instead, it is about the memory we genuinely believe actually happened in the past. It either never happened or happened very differently from the way we remember it. I have found examples of having a false memory in life. You might not believe it, but I have a really hard time holding chopsticks when I was a kid. I used to place 2 fingers on top to hold the chopstick tightly, just like holding a fist. I remember my parents had tried to teach me how to hold chopsticks, so I thought that was the correct way to hold them. However, as I grew up, I relearned to hold the chopsticks as my friend taught me. Put my middle finger down on the lower part of the sticks and adjust to the right posture for holding them. Well, I'm confident this was not something my father taught me, but in his testimony, he said it was what he taught me. It's either he lied to me, I have a false memory in this case, or we both have the wrong memory, given the context of memory reconstructions. This is what I can think of my experience of having a false memory. What about you? Do you have anything on your mind? Back to the definitions. In other words, the memory feels completely real to the person experiencing it. So how can this happen? To answer that question, we need to return to an important idea proposed by the British psychologist Frederick Bartlett. Let me stop here for a second and tell you a secret. I completely forgot who Bartlett was until the day I was typing this scripture. My textbook mentioned this guy in chapter 8. I opened my textbook again, and I noticed I completely missed reading the entire chapter. I was relying on my notes and practice quizzes the entire time, so I knew the related topics. Well, it's an opportunity for me to relearn theories again with you all. Bartlett suggests that human memory is reconstructive rather than reproductive. Instead of storing every experience exactly as it happened, our brains reconstruct memories whenever we remember them. According to Bartlett, remembering is an active process. When we recall an event, we don't simply replay a perfect recording. Instead, our brains rebuild the memory using fragments of the original experience, combining with our knowledge, expectations, beliefs, and previous experience. This process is closely related to another important concept called schemas. Schemas are mental frameworks that help us organize information about the world. They allow us to quickly understand familiar situations by drawing on prior knowledge and experience. For example, when you enter a restaurant, you already know what usually happens. You expect to be seated, receive a menu, order food, eat, and eventually pay the bill. These expectations comes from your schema about restaurants. Schema help us process information efficiently, but they can also influence what we remember. Sometimes, our brains fill in missing details with information that fits our expectations, even if those details were never actually present, because memory is reconstructed rather than perfectly replayed. It can sometimes become distorted. Did you get lost? Let me do it more simply. Reconstructives means to rebuild. It's like building with Lego blocks. Use up all the things that you remember in the past, piece by piece, to make up a whole scene of the story. And schema is a fancy word that psychologists use to describe a mental shortcut or mental filing cabinet. If you are watching this video, I assume you know how to use a computer. You know how to create folder on your computer. A schema is like the folders inside your computer. For example, you create the folder labeled Saturday Restaurant. In this folder, you have a document with instructions for eating in a restaurant. Walk in, wait for a seat, look at the menu, order, eat, then pay and leave. And reconstructive memory is like going to the restaurant on Saturday and your brain creates a Word document about the dinner. To save space on your USB drive, your brain will not write down all the details of what happened during dinner. Instead, it only lists the keywords for this scene, like pasta, Diet Coke, a girl servers, accidentally spilling my water. Based on this example, when you try to remember this episode, your brain will operate this way. Find the folder and open the document or memory inside the folder. When your brain opens the document, it will only see a few words about the story. Other than that, it was blank, so your brain will create a meaningful story based on the instructions recorded and written in the other instruction document, which is commonly shared with your whole time belief and process in the related real-life experience. If you remember, I said that before, sometimes your brain gets lazy and attempts to take a shortcut. So your brain decides to use the same instruction paper to create a story, even though the real experience is a bit different than the expected outcome. So your brain might make some mistake when reconstructing your memory. Now, let me introduce you a lovely lady who is one of the world's leading researchers on human memory, Elizabeth Loftus. I am not going to Google her life story this time since it's irrelevant to our topic today. Her research demonstrates that memories are much more flexible than people once believed. One of her most famous studies is known as the Lost in the Mall experiment. By the way, Jim Cohen had also been a part of working on this experiment. Let's get to the story. It happened in 1995, before I was born. The researchers contacted participants' family members and asked them to provide several real events from the participants' childhood. And then, the researchers make up a completely false story. You guessed it. Lost in the mall. The story claimed that when the person was a child, they became lost in the shopping mall. They were scared and were eventually rescued by their older relatives before being reunited with their family. Now, that person was asked to record each childhood event and write all the details down within 6 days. They didn't know one of them was fake. At first, participants said they did not remember the shopping mall incidents. However, after several interviews, a surprising number of participants began to believe that the event had actually happened. They assumed the source was real because they recognized some of the childhood events themselves. Some even added their own details describing what the shopping mall looks like, how frightened they felt, or what the older adult looked like. Their own memories entirely invented these details. The researchers had successfully created a false childhood memory. These experiments demonstrate that memory can sometimes be influenced by suggestions. Now, let's pause the video for a moment and take a break. Have a sip of coffee and steal some potato chips from the pantry. I know you are learning a lot of information today, but we are almost done. When you are ready, just continue playing the video. I'm going to let my girl Yukihana get on the stage to do a little dance for you guys. Welcome back! You ready for the rest of the game? The next experiment is absolutely famous and related to false memory. This famous study by Loftus and John Palmer in 1974 further showed how easily memories can be altered, which is called the Misinformation Effect. Here's the story. The participants watched the same videos of a traffic accident. Afterward, the researchers asked different groups of participants the same questions using slightly different wordings. One group was asked about how fast were the cars going when they hit each other. Another group was asked about how fast were the cars going when they were smashed into each other. Although everyone watched the same video, the wording influenced their memory. People who heard the word smash estimate higher speeds than those who heard the word hit. Even more, surprisingly, 1 week later, participants who had heard the word smash were more likely to report seeing broken glass at the accident scene. However, there had been no broken glass in the original video. The story ends here. Now, let me explain what the misinformation effect is. It occurs when information presented after an event changes a person's memory of the original event. This discovery has had massive implications for the legal system. Eyewitness testimony has traditionally been considered powerful evidence in court. However, psychologists now know that eyewitness memories are not always perfectly accurate. Police interviews, conversations with other witnesses, media reports, and even the wording of questions can unintentionally influence what people later remember. No, this does not necessarily mean that eyewitnesses are lying. What I am trying to say here is that our memory can be redirected and reconstructed. In many cases, they sincerely believe that their memories are accurate. The problem is that memory itself can change over time. Another factor that contributes to false memories is something called source monitoring. Source monitoring refers to our ability to remember where information originally came from. Sometimes we remember the information itself but forget its source. For example, we may remember hearing a story but forget whether we personally experienced it, read about it online, watch it in a movie, or heard someone else describe it. Not reliable, right? When we confuse these sources, false memories can develop more easily. Our memories are incredibly powerful, but they can also be surprisingly fragile. It's pretty much about the false memory altogether. These studies prove that our memory are neither perfect nor absolutely reliable. Instead, it is an active, reconstructive process that can be influenced by prior knowledge, expectations, suggestions, and subsequent experiences. So, do you have any experience with false memory? Most of the time, your memory serves you remarkably well. But remember, sometimes your brain can trick you badly. The next time you feel certain that you remember something exactly as it happened, remember that confidence does not always guarantee accuracy. Thank you for watching this video. This is your study buddy, Melissa. You all have a great day. Hope to see you again.